My family treated me like the invisible child for 30 years. You are a failure. I revealed my multi-million-dollar portfolio. The room froze. Pull up a chair if you've ever sat through a family reunion and pretended not to notice the favoritism being shoved in your face. This will strike a nerve. Jake is my name. I am 30 years old, and I was the invisible child in my own home for the majority of my life. The type is familiar to you. The person who is told, maybe next year, as he watches his sister, the golden child, open yet another brand new toy that she will break in 3 weeks. The one who learns the value of $1 while his sister is using his father's credit card like it's Monopoly money, and who learns to cook on his own since no one is ever home. I was that person. Silent, unnoticed, and undervalued. According to my parents, my younger sister Brenda, 3 years younger than me, was everything I wasn't. The list is endless. Athletic, gifted, talented, charming, and full of potential. She was the child who collected trophies, participated in out-of-state soccer tournaments on weekends, and attended week-long elite sports camps led by famous coaches. My parents did more than just support her aspirations. They gave them startup-style funding. I, on the other hand, was the computer-savvy kid who was advised to keep my dreams of starting a business grounded. For a very long time, I wasn't even upset about it. It was simply the way things were. That is the risky aspect of partiality. Screaming and shouting aren't always the first signs. There are moments when it's just quiet. Mentioning your passions can sometimes result in a shrug. A half-hearted "proud of you," or "we'll talk later," that never materializes, is muttered as they browse through their phone. Here's the twist though. I didn't become resentful. I became occupied. I began modestly. While Brenda was away playing varsity and receiving support from the stands, she worked on high school projects like building websites, repairing neighbors' laptops, learning SEO, coding, and selling cheap domains. I would hear about Brenda's game-winning goal or how she might be scouted for a university when I got home from my part-time job at a hardware store. Mom would be proud. Dad would open a beer in celebration. I was supposed to keep quiet so that Brenda wouldn't be distracted while she healed. The resources were just as important as the attention. They spent almost $25,000 on a GoPro Hero that she never used, an all-inclusive cruise across Europe with her friends, and her graduation trip alone. She returned with blurry pictures and tan lines. I received a generic Hallmark card with my name scribbled on it and a $60 Amazon gift card. I can still clearly recall what my mother said. Yes, something like not existing. Well, Jake, you're so independent. We figured you'd rather do something on your own. College? Paid for her in full. Car allowance, books, and a dorm. For me, it was either taking out student loans or not going to college at all. I went with the latter. I didn't do it out of pride, but rather because I already knew they wouldn't co-sign and I didn't want to start my life in debt to make a point. I spent that time learning as much as I could about real estate, digital marketing, and the areas of the internet that people don't pay attention to unless they're profitable. After a few years, I was in charge of social media accounts for real estate brokers, small businesses, and agents. The real money was in the properties, but I realized early on that the agents were just the fronts. I therefore began saving. No fancy cars, no takeout, no vacations, every dollar. I drove a rusted Corolla until the windows wouldn't roll down and rented the same rundown apartment. When I purchased my first duplex, I was 26 years old. I had 5 more when I was 28. At the age of 30, I have a neat little portfolio that is worth millions of dollars, if we're being technical. Naturally, in silence. Just hard, cold progress. No Instagram posts, no boasting. My family didn't know. I kept it from them. I failed to see the purpose. What were they going to say? That they were now proud? However, that leads me to the reunion. The reunion, oh boy. Have you ever had the impression that the universe is preparing something? As if it's drawing back the curtain and putting everyone in the proper location, waiting for the lights to turn on. That was how entering my uncle's lake house that day felt. Imagine this. Saturday in the sun. A family bustling around with plastic cups filled with sangria and plates of barbecue. As people complimented Brenda's girlfriend for nearly getting a job at a local sports network, she twirled her hair in the corner. While practically feeding her deviled eggs like a toddler, my mom continued to boast about her networking prowess. I was standing close to the back patio, drinking a watered-down soda, grinning and nodding. No one inquired about my activities. Not even in passing, not once. My cousin Emma, bless her inquisitive nature, came over at that point and said something that set off the chain of events. "Hey Jake, weren't you on some podcast or something?" My friend forwarded me a clip. Something about house hacking and rental income. Brenda looked away from the uninterested second cousin she had been showing off her new watch to. My mother chuckled. I laughed. Jake on a podcast. There must be a mistake. She constantly engages in those internet side gigs. I intended to ignore it. Yes, I was. Emma, however, refused to let it go. I was there when she took out her phone and browsed through her Instagram stories. A repost from her 500,000-follower real estate channel. My face in the thumbnail and my name in the caption discuss market trends and long-term rentals. Brenda's brows went up. Wait, that's really you? Everyone began to turn, shifting their gazes and halting their conversations. As if I had just stepped out of a magician's hat, my dad squinted. Yeah, I replied nonchalantly. I've been investing in real estate the last few years. Been going well. Brenda grumbled. Real estate? Like flipping houses? What do you know about that? I replied with a shrug. Then there was silence. Enough to own 9 properties, I guess. The sound of plastic forks striking paper plates could be heard. However, this was only the start. The moment when you can sense something approaching as the air gets thicker. In the back of my mind, I sensed my uncle's eyes sharpen, my mom's smile waver, and Brenda's jaw twitch. Bubbling up to the surface is the slow burn of all those years. There was no quiet at the end of that day. As a family, it culminated in a full-blown explosion that destroyed all of the lies we had ever told ourselves. Brenda said the first 5 words that would cause everything to fall apart. You didn't earn any of it. Have you ever heard someone say something so absurd, so out of touch with reality that it makes your head freeze? For example, your system can't handle the sheer audacity and has to restart. That was who I was at the time. Brenda's voice was sharp, just loud enough to make the patio seem like a theater, and her face was red. I blinked once and twice. You didn't earn any of it. You just mooched off the family like always. I was perspiring while holding my soda cup. Everybody froze. Mom laughed a little awkwardly. The kind that sounds like the deflation of a balloon. But she wasn't finished. Brenda, come on. Oh no. She had accumulated years of entitlement. And I suppose an emotional tsunami was set off by my success. Stepping forward, she yelled, You think you're some big shot now? Because you bought a few houses. Please. You wouldn't have gotten anywhere without this family. You think we didn't support you? I actually laughed and said, Support me? In a way that was more sour than I intended. I glanced at everyone I recognized on the patio. I grew up with my parents, aunts, uncles, and cousins. No one spoke. Most of them turned their heads away. Some sipped their drinks as if they had not heard anything. I looked back at Brenda. Support me? You mean like when you got a $25,000 graduation cruise and I got a $60 gift card? Or when Mom and Dad fully paid for your college and told me to figure it out myself? Dad's expression tightened. That's not fair. You said you didn't want to go to college because I couldn't afford it. I was getting louder. You said I was too independent for help, but Brenda needed a new laptop. Done. Her car broke down. You bought her a new one. I walked to work for 8 months in the snow and you didn't even ask if I needed a ride. Brenda continued to scoff. You could have asked. I looked over at her. Why would I? So I could be reminded again that I don't matter. Something seemed to finally burst open inside of me. All of the quiet years, the gritted teeth, the silent swallowing of pride, and the forced smiles on birthdays when my gift was a last-minute addition. Everything began to spill out. I said, You've always had it easy, Brenda, in a more steady voice than I had anticipated. And instead of appreciating it, you walk around like you deserve it, like you earned it. But the truth is, you've never had to fight for anything in your life. Her pupils widened. I shook my head and said, Oh, so now you're the victim? No, I'm not the victim. I just stopped playing along. And that's when it took place. The betrayal was unexpected. Mom crossed her arms and moved between us. She always gave me that classic tight-lipped look when I made a scene. Jake, she remarked abrasively, this isn't the time or place. Naturally, because heaven forbid reality taints Brenda's flawless image. Stunned, I said, You're defending her? She made no hesitation at all. You're making a spectacle out of a family gathering. Whatever your issues are, we can talk about it privately. I gave her a serious look and then it dawned on me. No miscommunication occurred, no unspoken misunderstandings. She meant it. I was the issue in her eyes. Not Brenda, not the obvious partiality, not the years of disregard. That hurt me more than I thought it would. Then, just as expected, Dad added his voice. We're all proud of what you've done, son. But there's no need to rub it in. Do you want to? Not a single dollar amount had been mentioned by me. I hadn't bragged, flexed, displayed a car, pulled up my portfolio, or even used the word million. I only verified what someone else had mentioned. And I was the bad guy somehow. As she stood there, arms folded, smug as ever, Brenda reveled in the glory of her defense. It dawned on me then that this was not an isolated incident. This dynamic had existed indefinitely. Simply put, I never had the leverage to see it clearly. You know what? I asked, attempting to speak without trembling. You're right. This isn't the place. Because I'm realizing now I don't have a place here. Dad's older brother, my Uncle Robert, shifted uneasily. He had never really taken sides in anything and had always been the one who watched from a distance. However, I caught a glimpse of his face flickering. Perhaps worry, acknowledgement. But no one spoke up. I grabbed the railing and stared at the water as I made my way away from the group and toward the lake's edge. My heart was racing, not because I was angry, but because of something more profound. Sadness and disappointment. That boy died that day, and I still hope that one day his parents will say, "We're sorry we overlooked you. We're proud of what you've done." I tried to relax by the water for a while, assuming the breeze would erase my feelings. Then, from behind me, I heard footsteps. Brenda naturally. "Now don't leave," she said. I didn't even look at her when she said, "You wanted attention, right? You got it." I didn't want to be noticed. I desired to be respected. I believe that I have earned more than you will ever have because I worked for everything I have while you were given the world. You think owning a few buildings means you're better than me? She became agitated. I finally turned to her and said, "You're still the same insecure loser you've always been. And you're still the same spoiled kid who throws tantrums when she's not the center of the universe." Her jaw was clenched. The words, "At least Mom and Dad love me," were there. I didn't flinch at all. "Yeah," I muttered. Her face slightly lowered when she said, "They do. You can have them." With the intention of leaving in silence, I made my way back up the lawn to retrieve my keys. This wasn't necessary for me. I had outgrown it. Everything. I heard the voice that would alter everything as soon as I got to the porch. Uncle Robert stood by the grill and said, actually, quite clearly, "Jake earned every bit of what he has, and maybe if any of you paid attention you'd know why." Everyone looked around. Brenda froze too. Uncle Robert moved forward, his face unreadable as he wiped his hands on a towel. "You all treat that boy like he's just lucky, like he stumbled into money. But I've watched him hustle since he was 16. He used to clean out my gutters and fix my broken laptop for next to nothing. You remember that, Jake?" Uncertain of the direction of this, I nodded slowly. "He built my company's first website for free, spent weekends fixing my team's systems, and never asked for a dime. That kid saved us thousands when we couldn't afford proper IT. I also made her 2 job offers. She declined both times because she preferred to create something herself." The quiet was oppressive. Mike looked at my father. Dad opened his mouth, but nothing came out. "And what did you do? You told her to stop wasting time on the computer and get a real job." Mike continued. "While she was starting a business from scratch, you all looked down on her." Brenda muttered, "And now that she's successful, you act like it just fell into her lap." She might be interrupted by someone saying, "That doesn't mean she didn't have help." Who helped you, Brenda? Not you, not your parents, not anyone here. You had all the doors open for you. She made her own door and you went through them as if it were yours, Jake. The air was heavy now. No one shifted. "Really?" Mike asked me as he turned to face me. "You don't owe anyone an explanation. You did this yourself and don't ever let anyone take that from you." I was left speechless. But Brenda was unable to handle it. When she yelled, her voice broke. "She's manipulating all of you. She's always been fake. She's just trying to make me look bad." Brenda blew up when Mike said, "No. Cool as ever. You did that all on your own." Chest heaving, red-faced. She rushed toward me and poked my chest with a finger. "You think you're better than me? You're nothing. You think a couple of buildings makes you successful? You're just a fluke." I wasn't worried. I remained motionless. I remained silent and simply met her gaze. because I didn't see anger in her face. Fear was the cause. Now she was aware of the reality. I had turned into everything she had claimed to be, and no one was going to protect her from the repercussions of that for the first time in her life. I didn't feel victorious when I drove away from that reunion. Not even close. I didn't feel proud. It wasn't the praise that made me glow. I didn't mentally repeat Uncle Mike's words while grinning. Actually, I hardly remembered it. Brenda's voice continued to ring in my ears. Behind my eyes I saw my mother's face, which looked like a poorly taken photo. I spent hours that night driving. You're making a spectacle like I'd committed some crime by telling the truth. I had no idea where I was heading. Right away. I once found myself sitting in my car in a gas station parking lot 3 towns away, looking at a dimly lit sign that advertised microwave burritos. I refrained from crying. Even I wasn't upset. I simply felt as though someone had taken the air out of my chest and left me floating, numb and hollowed out. You are taught from an early age that hard work, perseverance will pay off. That your parents will notice eventually. They will observe your progress. We were wrong, they will say. You achieved success. However, they didn't. They perceived an annoyance, a danger, and a reminder that they would risk everything on the wrong child. I stopped responding to family texts for a while after that. I didn't answer voicemails or attend birthday parties. In any case, the majority came from extended family. No one really wanted to hear the whole story, so they sent half-hearted messages like, "You okay?" or "You kinda snapped back there." All they wanted was for me to put things right and act like the grown-up once more. All my life, I had been that guy. The one who swallowed the insult so the day wouldn't be ruined and remained silent to maintain harmony. But I was no longer that person. Nor was I in a hurry to take his place. I neglected my business for several weeks. I had a full inbox. Emails from clients were not returned. I hardly looked at the pile of rent checks in the property manager's portal. On some days I didn't go out, I didn't answer my friends, and I didn't open my apartment's curtains. I wasn't exactly depressed. I was simply worn out. The kind of fatigue you carry in your bones, the kind that sleep doesn't relieve. One evening, while automatically browsing through my phone, I stumbled upon a picture in which I was tagged. Brenda and I at one of her soccer matches years ago. I must have been 18. As she posed with her medal, I stood off to the side of the field holding her water bottle. I appeared to be an observer of my own family's existence. And I realized it. For years, I've been on the sidelines. Yes, it's building quietly, but I'm constantly hoping someone will invite me to the center. They didn't. Perhaps it was time for me to stop waiting. I opened the blinds, had a real breakfast, and shaved the following morning. I began going through the backlog after retrieving my laptop from beneath a stack of unread mail. It was similar to turning on a switch that I hadn't used in weeks. Brick by brick, I reconstructed my routines. Meetings with clients, property inspections, repair schedules, tenant portal checks, and SEO campaign adjustments. I emerged from the fog with each task. Then an unforeseen event occurred. I received an email from a podcast about real estate investing that I had participated in 8 months prior. The viral video that my cousin Emma had shared from the reunion had caught the attention of the host. The video, which had received over 2 million views on TikTok, was apparently shared by someone with the caption, "Real estate investor gets ambushed by jealous family." A follow-up interview was requested by the host. I nearly declined. I didn't want more attention, but then I understood that it wasn't the point. It had to do with who owned my story, not property. A week later, the interview went live. There was no drama. I didn't reveal information or disparage my family. I simply discussed what it was like to be undervalued growing up. To create something on your own. To quietly recognize your value when no one else does. Then an odd thing began to happen. Dozens, then hundreds of emails. Those who had listened to the podcast or seen the clip began contacting us. Not supporters, fellow stragglers, or individuals like me. One man remarked, "I thought I was alone, but I had to take 2 buses to work after my brother got a car when he was 16. I just opened my 3rd salon." Their stories cracked something open in me. I wasn't alone. I never had been. Another woman wrote, "My parents never said they were proud of me." One of the messages that most resonated with me was this one. I realized I was doing more than simply rebuilding a business when I heard a man named Jaden say, "You helped me stop waiting for their approval." I wanted more as I rebuilt myself. As usual, I began to grow subtly, but with more intent. I started a YouTube channel, negotiated a storage facility with a partner I met through the podcast, and purchased 2 more multifamily apartments. Simple advice on house hacking, credit building, and identifying properties that are undervalued. No glitz. Going viral was not my goal. I just showed up, but eventually someone else found out because word spreads. I had no idea, Brenda, until she unexpectedly messaged me. No greeting, just a funny story about how you became famous after a family breakdown. I gazed at it for a minute. Since the reunion, I hadn't heard from her. I considered not responding. I simply typed back after that. Telling the truth, not fame. She didn't answer. Silence, however, was not peace as I knew. It served as a warning. It began a few weeks later. My mother called first. Left a message on the voicemail. Just enough guilt in a trembling voice makes it sound genuine. Jake, can we talk? Your sister's going through a tough time. She didn't mean what she said. I didn't return the call. Then Dad sent an email. Stiff and short. Your mother's worried. Don't let this silly misunderstanding blow up the family. Misunderstanding. I removed it. The kicker came next. A real estate investor I had previously worked with called. Claimed that someone had contacted me under false pretenses, requesting bank routing numbers, financial information, and attempts to verify transactions. The message was obvious, but they flagged it right away. Someone was attempting to undermine me, and only 2 people were sufficiently knowledgeable to attempt such a thing. My sister is one of them. I realized then that this was not the end of it. Jealousy was no longer the only factor. It had to do with control. Brenda had always thought of herself as the family's top dog. That I would always be in her shadow, regardless of what I did. She couldn't stand it, though, now that she was in mine. I began to tighten everything. I froze my credit, changed my passwords, added 2-factor authentication to all of my accounts, and enlisted a friend who was a lawyer to help me write cease and desist letters for any suspicious activity. I wasn't in a panic. The next stage involved more than just surviving, so I was getting ready. It was about securing what I had created and making the final decision to stop playing defense. As it happens, I was going to get the ideal opportunity from someone. One more family get-together. I wasn't the one entering quietly this time, though, and it hadn't even occurred yet. The moment that altered everything. Inside the navy blue envelope, which was made of thick cardstock with gold cursive lettering that went a bit too far in trying to look expensive, was the invitation. The phrase, "Please join us in celebrating the 40th wedding anniversary of Michael and Diane, my parents," was so well crafted, formal, and generic that it gave the impression that it was a royal gala rather than a family performance. I read it twice. Once for subtext, once for logistics. I was supposed to be there. I should say that they needed me there. That was novel. Unless something has changed, you don't go from being the family ghost to receiving invitations with gold embossments. I had a gut feeling that it had nothing to do with making amends. Nobody had expressed regret. No late-night "we messed up" calls or olive branches. Just an unexpected show of interest. I also didn't believe it for a moment after what transpired at the reunion. For a week, I kept the envelope on my counter. I smiled as I picked it up and looked at it. One had no idea that I had been waiting for this chance. I had no intention of coming to make amends. I was going to be ready. No more entering like a blank space in the hopes of being acknowledged. This time I would come in like a period. Clean, definitive, and unavoidable. However, I had to find out what game they were playing before I could play my cards. My cousin Emma, who had unintentionally started the drama at the previous reunion by bringing up my podcast appearance, was the first person I spoke to. Sharp, perceptive, and, above all, not scared to spill tea if you bought her a matcha latte, she had always been. We got together at a cafe close to my house. She smiled as soon as she saw me. I barely laughed as I was doing recon. Jake, the prodigal son, returns. Leaning in, she took a sip of her drink. You want the truth, or the family version? Hit me with the real one. She spoke more softly. Your mom's been in damage control mode since the reunion. Apparently some of the relatives were talking about you, your business, that podcast. Even Uncle Robert asked if you were investing on behalf of the family or just yourself. I blinked. Wait, what? I could feel the familiar tightness behind my eyes as I said, yeah, your dad got defensive. Said you were doing your own thing, but it's too late. People know now. And let's just say it's not sitting well with a few folks, especially Brenda. And now they're throwing this anniversary party, Emma went on. And guess who's helping plan it? I didn't even need to speculate. It was Brenda, she said. She's been talking it up like it's the social event of the year. Invited a local news reporter she had worked with as an intern. I believe she's attempting to change course, reinvent herself, or do something that works. Brenda had an obsession with pictures. It had always been. She used to spend more time doing her hair than studying, even as a teenager. It wasn't a celebration of mom and dad's marriage if she was attending. She wanted to draw attention to herself. Additionally, I suspected that she didn't want me to interfere with her story. I said, "Let me guess. They're hoping I'll come play nice and clap politely while Brenda makes some speech about family legacy." Emma smiled. Bingo. This was just a case of optics, not reconciliation. They wished to preserve the family's history. The delusion that I was the quiet, helpful older brother in the background, and Brenda was the star child. Steady, undetectable, and unimportant. I was done playing along though, and that version of myself was long gone. I would give them a show if they requested one. Timing was the first step. I failed to RSVP. I didn't send a text. I made sure they were unaware of my impending arrival. Give them time to stew. Let Brenda worry about whether I would arrive and spoil her well-planned performance. Preparation is the second step. For the next 2 weeks I worked on honing my story. Not in a deceptive manner, merely gathering receipts. In order to tell the real story, I put together a visual portfolio of my properties that included pictures, timelines, tenant testimonials with consent, and statistics. Not to boast, but to demonstrate beyond a shadow of a doubt that this was not some internet prank or lucky break. Every brick had been earned by me. After that, I updated my LLC paperwork and made sure it was tidy, sealed, and eye-catching. Just in time to bring it up if necessary, I recently had a couple properties refinanced at advantageous rates. However, my favorite piece was a recent purchase that I had kept a secret from everyone. A modest but promising mixed-use commercial building with 2 retail tenants already signed and a third in talks. It was close enough for some family members to recognize the address because it was local. Why did that matter? Because it was once owned by one of Dad's old poker friends, who once told me bluntly that tech nerds like you shouldn't invest in real estate. His burned-out son gave it to me at a discount. Poetry. I was prepared, polished, and ready in every way. I wasn't walking and swinging though. I wasn't like that. I wasn't there to boast. I was there to take back control of the story. The universe, however, occasionally adds its own flavor. Uncle David called me 3 days prior to the anniversary celebration. You going?" he inquired. "No." "Hello?" He sighed as he considered it. "They're planning something. Just a heads up." "What kind of something?" "I don't know exactly, but Brenda's been talking to your dad a lot. Sounded like they're putting together some kind of legacy montage." I stopped. "And surprise, surprise, you're barely in it." I exhaled through my nose. "What?" "Photos, videos, stories about the family history." That was the last encouragement I needed. "Of course. Erase the parts that don't fit the story." I said, "I'll be there." And I would be prepared this time. It was rainy and overcast on the day of the celebration, as though the sky itself wasn't sure if it should be friendly. I intentionally arrived late. A rented country club ballroom served as the venue. The cheap wine and dollar store centerpieces are being covered up by white linen tables and chandeliers. Brenda was the first to notice me. When our eyes locked, her jaw twitched. I casually and unconcernedly nodded to her. It appeared as though she wanted to punch a wall. Mom and Dad were conversing with a group of visitors. When Mom saw me, her smile narrowed. Dad didn't even raise his head. From across the room, Emma gestured for me to come over. "You're late." Fashionably, I said. A glass of something vaguely citrusy was handed to me. "They're showing the legacy video soon." I arched an eyebrow. "You watch it?" "Oh, I got a sneak peek. Let's just say it's heavy on Brenda's highlight reel. Travel photos, soccer trophies, college acceptance letter, internship footage, the whole 9 yards. And me?" She sighed. "You're in a couple of baby photos. And there's a slide that says, Jake, pursuing tech projects. That's all. Pursuing technological endeavors." It nearly made me laugh. They summed up a multi-million-dollar real estate portfolio in that way. Excellent. When the lights went down, I quietly sat down. The slideshow began. Brenda's sports montage, family beach vacations, childhood pictures, wedding photos, and music. They said my name once. Not a voiceover. It was just a slide with that ambiguous caption. My business, properties, growth, years of sacrifice, and pursuit of tech projects are all left out. After the lights came up and everyone gave a courteous clap, Brenda took the microphone. She started with, "Thanks everyone, all teeth and all confidence. I just want to say how grateful I am to be part of this amazing family. The values Mom and Dad taught us. Hard work, humility, resilience, they made me who I am." I cocked my head. Perseverance and hard work. She talked endlessly about passing the torch, legacy, and vision. It was a carefully constructed illusion, well practiced. Then she said it. I hope to carry that legacy forward. Maybe even bring the family together for a new project, something long-term. Maybe even investing together. I blinked. It was there. The arrangement. She wasn't merely changing her name. She was presenting herself as the head of the family, the one who would lead them all into new endeavors, and the future. I observed the space. They were grinning, nodding, and soaking it up. The applause was sincere as she concluded, "We all have a role to play, and I'm excited to see how we can build together." However, I wasn't clapping because I knew exactly what would happen next. To gain control over the future, they had wiped me out of history. And I was no longer just in the room, so that was a mistake. I had something for which they weren't ready when I was at the table. The room erupted in courteous applause and flimsy smiles as soon as Brenda concluded her remarks. She took it all in as she stood there speaking to her court like a queen. People nodded and clinked their glasses. As she left the stage, some even gave her a pat on the back. I waited. I took my time. I didn't immediately stand up or call for attention. I simply allowed the quiet to return. Then I got up. A few people looked around. I glanced at my Uncle David, who nodded slightly. Intrigued, Emma raised one eyebrow. Brenda's eyes narrowed as she paused in the middle of her wine. I approached the microphone. I said, "Hey everyone," while calmly adjusting it. With a steady voice and a calm heart, I said, "I promise I won't take long." I had mentally practiced this moment countless times. But I didn't feel anger now that it was real. Clarity was the key. I looked around the room and said, "I just wanted to say a quick thank you to Mom and Dad for inviting me. 40 years is a significant accomplishment. Such longevity is worthy of praise." And I pointed to this party. "It's amazing." Brenda gave a rigid smile as if she was anticipating the joke. However, as we're discussing legacy, I went on. I wanted to make a few things clear. You may have noticed a slide in the video that stated I was working on tech projects. It's incomplete, but it's not wrong. People moved. Something changed in the energy. I decided to fill in the gaps. Some of you are familiar with me while others are not. My name is Jake. I am 30 years old. I didn't attend college. Never obtained a degree. I didn't receive praise at family dinners or be scouted for sports. I didn't receive tuition assistance, a car, or a graduation trip. It was me who was on my own. I looked at my parents. My mother refused to look me in the eye. My father gazed at his glass indifferently. I did, however, work on tech projects. Began creating websites when he was 16. I learned SEO on my own. To save money, I worked nights. I purchased my first rental property when I was 26. I've since purchased 9 additional duplexes, triplexes, and a few small commercial buildings. One of Dad's friends used to own a mixed-use building downtown, which I recently closed on. There was a response to that. My father's head jerked up. He opened his mouth a little. He understood exactly who I was referring to. I continued. Without family funding or assistance, all of this was constructed. I was spending my weekends fixing laptops while Brenda was at prestigious soccer camps. I rode my bike to job interviews while she had her car upgraded. Brenda folded her arms and stood up. She had lost her smile. I don't say this to brag, I went on. However, the story should be corrected because stories are important and influence how we perceive one another. And this family's story has been unfinished for far too long. I hesitated, letting that linger. I've kept quiet about it because I believed that if I worked hard enough, the truth would come out on its own. However, I decided it was time to talk tonight after seeing a slideshow that completely erased me from my own family's past. I then took out my phone and, after Brenda mentioned investing together, I tapped the screen and said, I thought it'd be useful to share a few numbers. I then turned to face the large screen where the slideshow had previously been playing. The AV setup was what I had expected. Earlier that day, I sent my files to the event organizer with the title, Anniversary photos, last-minute additions. The screen illuminated with a single tap. Slide 1 shows a small but genuine photo of me holding keys and grinning in front of my first duplex. A timeline of my real estate purchases is shown on Slide 2. Slide 3. Cash flow, market appreciation, monthly revenue and passive income chart. The commercial building before and after renovations are shown on Slide 4. A silent little note on Slide 5 reads, net worth, $5 million. There are gasps and whispers, followed by silence. Lastly, a quote on the final slide. I took a step back from the microphone and said, sometimes the black sheep is just the one who got tired of pretending. Not another word. I didn't have to say anything more. With total composure, I left the stage and returned to my table. Not arrogant, not spiteful, just finished. Brenda appeared as though the ground had been lifted from beneath her. Her mouth parted, then shut again. She looked around the room in the hopes that someone would laugh it off, divert attention, or save her. Nobody did. Aunt Michelle whispered something as she leaned in close to her husband. Uncle Robert appeared to be impressed. Some of the younger cousins even took out their phones and most likely Googled my name. The spell was no longer effective. I was no longer invisible. Brenda wasn't untouchable either. The fallout started quickly. I overheard fragments of whispered conversations later that night as the party came to an end and guests began to leave. Did you know Jake had all that going on? I thought Brenda was the successful one. As I was packing to leave, my mom tried to talk to me saying, no, I heard Jake's been on podcasts. There was a clip trending last month. Can you imagine working that hard and being written out of the slideshow? I looked her in the eye for the first time in a long time and asked, Jake, why didn't you ever tell us about all this? Would you have listened? She asked, opening and closing her mouth before remaining silent. Dad didn't say anything to me, but Brenda wasn't done trying. She went to the parking lot with me. She growled, real mature, Jake? Embarrassing your own family like that? I arched an eyebrow. You mean correcting the record? You hijacked the whole night, made it about you. No, I replied as I unlocked my vehicle. You made it about you. I just refused to play along. She moved to the front. I paused before turning to face her. You think this makes you better than me? I asked. She stopped talking when I said, no. I think it makes me free. The night air was crisp and cool as I drove home with the windows down. I didn't feel like I was carrying anything for the first time in years. I didn't need anyone's approval. Didn't yearn for a chance to fit in. I am now my own property. This is the amusing aspect of retaliation. It doesn't need to be noisy. Having to be cruel is not necessary. Living a life they can't deny, spin, or justify is sometimes the best form of retaliation. A life in which the facts are more powerful than their tales ever could be. And I made sure that nobody would ever leave me out of the story again after that night. I was excluded from the legacy. I therefore constructed my own.